Hi guys, so chapter 15 teaches us all about cell communication through cell signaling and cell transduction. So for this report, I will be discussing apoptosis, otherwise known as programmed cell death. So apoptosis is a normal process that occurs through coordinated sequences of events leading to the death of the desired cell. So this process is also special to animal cells. Some key characteristics of this event is shrinkage of the cell volume and the nucleus, a loss of adhesion to adjacent cells, and the dissection of chromatin, and finally the consumption of the remaining cell by phagocytosis. So these changes are activated by enzymes called caspases, which are distinctive groups of cytosine proteases. They are involved in the early stages of the process and trigger the physical changes that we end up seeing. The caspases accomplish this by targeting protein kinases, which affect the detachment of the cell, lamins, which line the nuclear envelope, proteins found in the cytoskeleton, and caspases activated DNase or CAD, which attack the DNA, breaking it into fragments. And here is an illustration showing the process of apoptosis. As you see, it's shrinking and becoming into those fragments. So in addition to apoptosis, it's sometimes compared to another form of cell death called narcosis. This way usually results in something like a physical trauma or things like that. So similar to apoptosis, narcosis is a regulated and programmed process. However, under these circumstances, the cell and its internal organs swell instead of shrinking. The membrane breaks, causing the cell to leak and induces inflammation. And here's another image to show the differences between the two, how you have apoptosis here and narcosis here, and you can see that it's fragmented and the things are oozing out. An interesting analogy the book used was to think of apoptosis as controlled breaking of a building using carefully placed explosives, as compared to narcosis, where you just randomly place these bombs and they explode and you're blowing up a building without having a concern for debris or the destruction and what follows after. So now that we know what apoptosis is, we can move to the question of when does it come into play. An event where apoptosis is crucial is during embryonic development. When our hands are forming, they actually look more like paddles. But with the help of apoptosis, our fingers are carved out by the removal of the excess and unwanted cells. This important control of undesired cells doesn't stop during development, though. It continues into our adulthood. It has been estimated that 10 billion to 100 billion cells die every day through apoptosis. This includes cells that have sustained irreversible genomic damage or removed cells that are no longer needed, such as activated T cells. Situations where apoptosis is reduced or elevated have been linked to several diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington's, type 1 diabetes, and cancer. Next, recent studies have found that there are two possible pathways that can signal apoptosis: extrinsic and intrinsic. The easy thing is that both these functions sound exactly how they both function exactly how they sound. The intrinsic pathway is initiated by external stimulus, and the extracellular ligands bind to the surface of the death receptors, which then leads to the formation of signal-inducing cell death. One example is the stimulus of a messenger protein called tumor necrosis factor, or the TNF, and I'm so sorry, this is upside down. And the TNF binds to its receptor, and the bound receptor recruits procaspases to the intracellular domain of the receptor, and the procaspases also convert other procaspases into caspases, which then, as I mentioned before, trigger the apoptosis we see. Now, the intrinsic pathway is initiated by intracellular stimulus, such as genetic damage, lack of oxygen, or viral infection. So this image is a little bit more going on, and it is the upside down as well. But we're going to focus more on the right side and the bottom. So for this process, pro-apoptotic proteins stimulate the mitochondria, which is right here, to leak proteins, specifically cytochrome C. And once cytochrome C is in the cytosol, it forms part of a multi-protein complex called apoptosome. It's important to understand that after the mitochondria releases the apoptotic proteins, the cell irreversibly commits to apoptosis. Now, one would assume that this process is messy and uncontrollable. However, our body is amazing. In apoptosis, cell death occurs without spilling cellular content, thus preventing inflammation and other tissue damage. So I hope after watching this you have a better understanding or feel refreshed on the delicate process of cell death or apoptosis. Thank you.